I don't know about them. I don't know what they do. But I don't know. Maybe they were clients of Rudy. You'd have to ask Rudy. I just don't know. You have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Over there, ask them. Is Rudy going to be the new Michael Cohen? Trump seeming to throw him under the bus, much like he did to Michael Cohen, who now sits in federal prison. The classic, I hardly knew him defense from the president comes as Rudy appears more and more exposed in a federal investigation that's already swept up two of his top fixers in Ukraine. The Washington Post reporting, quote, a person familiar with the investigation said federal agents are scrutinizing Giuliani's dealings with Parnas and Fruman. Those are the guys indicted yesterday after having lunch with Rudy, but cautioned that this was to be expected as the FBI examines the pair's finances. Rudy Giuliani, for his part, not backing down, and he's standing by his henchmen. Giuliani said he had no reason to believe he was under investigation by the FBI and defended his associates, saying this, quote, I certainly am not going to disavow them. I have no reason to doubt them. Everything I've known about them says they would not commit a crime. The table's back. I mean, so, okay. I mean, SDNY didn't think so.
Obviously, if Rudy is their principal lawyer, he's not a very good one because they got arrested going from the first-class lounge at Lufthansa onto their plane at Dulles yesterday. I think there are many questions here. Number one is, what was the nature of his representation? What was he representing them in connection with? He also says that in addition to being a lawyer on potential criminal matters, he was also giving them, quote, civil business advice. No one really understands what that means. And also a third question is, did he go to them and say, I want your support and your assistance in my relationships in Ukraine to promote the effort that we ultimately came to see, which was this ultimatum presented to President Zelensky to get involved in the 2020 election? There are a lot of questions here, and none of it looks good for Rudy Giuliani. And if the FBI has got wiretaps and investigations of these two men, clearly they have communications with Rudy Giuliani as well.
Two national security officials said to me yesterday that for them to have sort of the knowledge that they were going from lunch with Giuliani at the Trump Hotel to the airport, they must have been listening. If they were listening to them, they may have also been listening to Rudy.
Well, I think what you just touched on is the most damning thing here. I mean, let's paint this picture here. They're sitting at the Trump Hotel with one-way tickets in their pocket, proverbially, to get on a one-way plane to abroad as they're about to be arrested, and they're having lunch with the president's attorney.
Can I just, as someone who spends a lot of time on TripAdvisor, buying a one-way ticket to a foreign country is really hard. It like screams, "Get me!"
I'm an aviation geek, so I know it's bizarre, and the indictment does indicate, it seems to indicate at least, that there are phone taps because it references conversations that they were having on the phone. So you would have to guess that someone was listening into a lot of what they were saying. So this whole picture just doesn't look terribly good, to say the least.
Your paper is an extraordinary body of reporting on all the happenings at SDNY. And there was a not at all veiled insinuation yesterday from Jeff Berman, who's a Don McGahn ally, a Trump appointee, runs that office, and he made perfectly clear that corruption in our elections will be investigated and prosecuted. He made perfectly clear the investigation was ongoing. And I think both of the gentlemen that spoke yesterday had comments that didn't necessarily relate to the indictments, but spoke out against foreign interference.
Absolutely. And, what these two associates of Rudy had done, and we reported today, it surprised me. They seem to have no real jobs, right? No business that's actually operational, and yet they somehow managed to give $1 million to Republican candidates and super PACs in just the last couple of years. And of course, the big problem they face is they are accused of funneling foreign money through an LLC. So enabling a foreign straw donor to give to an election. So that's kind of like the big charge. Yeah.
Called a clue.
Yeah. And not a coincidence. It wasn't a Canadian donor. It was a Russian donor.
Absolutely. And so, there's so much more we need to explore here. But I thought was interesting, too, in that press conference was they seemed to leave the sense in their comments, we're not done yet. These guys were about to go to Vienna, so we went and got them, but we're not done.
One more observation here.
Yeah, please.
What the charges indicate to me, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've covered this stuff and followed it, they charged them on campaign finance charges, which are not terribly weighty charges. It's still against the law, but they're not. That would indicate to me and indicated to some of my colleagues that they are trying to get more information out
A
of them.
deal might be available, yeah.
And just that they're not going to jail most likely, I don't think, for campaign finance charges. Although these are serious charges, it just does seem like the combination of them saying we're still talking with the investigations ongoing, plus the campaign finance.
And we
But
should
remember
note,
when we were sitting around this table talking about the campaign finance violations for which Michael Cohen is now sitting in jail, and that was used as a lever to get additional information. And I think it's a real signal that we are at the very beginning of this story and investigation and not at the end.
And they got something for their money.
Right.
Because they gave money to Representative Sessions, former rep in Texas, and then asked him to write a letter to urge the State Department to get rid of the ambassador in Ukraine.
And he did.
And he did.
And he got it.
Just tie the first two stories together for us.
Well, I mean, this is part of an effort that Rudy Giuliani was in the middle of to obtain support from a foreign government to interfere in the 2020 election, period, full stop. In some ways, the conduct here, which happened in 2018, all predated President Zelensky's emergence as a potential counterparty for this transaction between the United States and Ukraine. And in some respects, the criminal process is going to take longer than the impeachment calendar. So I'm not really sure at the end of the day how relevant whatever information they have may be. However, it just puts a taint over everything. And for them, as you noted, to sit at the Trump Hotel with one-way tickets in their pocket and to claim, we're the corruption team, we're the anti-corruption team, we're the ones fighting corruption, really, I think, undermines their argument.
There were some allusions to these two gentlemen as the 2019 version of Nixon's plumbers. Do you see any parallels?
I love that. I have not heard that. I do. I like that a lot because they are kind of clown-like. I mean, they go over to Ukraine and they drop names and they talk about how close they are to the president and to Rudy Giuliani, and then they try to get investors for these companies that fail over and over again. And they come back here and they try to pretend like they have big investors overseas that could help them with any companies they tried to start in this country. And ultimately, they end up in a bunch of lawsuits and bankruptcies.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.